Chodesh Elul. Correct. So let's talk about Elul and the impact of Elul, right? Elul, of course, is the month of the year which really represents the beginning of the tshuva process. Elul is spelled Aleph Lamed Vav Lamed, and it's considered to be an acronym for Ani L'Doidi V'Doidi Li, which is a quote from King Solomon. Right? Ani L'Doidi V'Doidi Li means I am for my beloved and my beloved is for me. Which means Elul, the whole concept of Elul, the whole concept of the month of Elul is to draw us closer to God. Let us know that God is there, that God is waiting for us, and that God wants us to make those moves in order to draw closer to Him and to want to be together with Him. I once heard a very beautiful explanation. It's not 100% serious, but I think it's something which is something we can all relate to, from Rabbi Beryl Wine, who said that why do we call God Dodi? Dodi means my beloved, right? But a Dod in Hebrew is also an uncle. So he says, why do we call God our uncle? So he says the difference between everyone's got like a favorite uncle. Yeah? What's the big deal about the favorite uncle? So he's like they're non-conditional love. He comes and he gives you presents and he gives you a good time, and then he goes, right? And it's like, and you wait for him to come back again. Yeah. And it's something which, parents, we love our parents. Of course we love our parents, but they're always telling us what to do, right? Or rather telling us what not to do, right? Don't do this, don't do that, you can't do this, you can't do that. And of course it's our parents that are building us and are bringing us up, right? We understand that. But nevertheless, this idea of having somebody who's just going to come through, accept us for who we are, and to love us for who we are, that's that favorite uncle. And so he explained that Ani L'Doidi V'Doidi Li, that I'm for my beloved and my beloved is for me, that God is a Dod. He's like this favorite uncle that we've got that is going to love us unconditionally. But it's not quite so simple. It comes with all kinds of strings attached. It definitely is conditional, that's for sure. Which means that God wants us to do what He's commanded us to do, which is to keep the Torah. God wants us to come into Rosh Hashanah in a state of cleanliness, in a state of purity, right? And doing that requires going through a process of what's called tshuva, right? What is tshuva? The word tshuva comes from the word lashuv, to return, right? So we're returning to God. The whole idea, the Sfas Emes, one of the great Hasidic Rebbes, the second Rebbe from Gur, explains that the word teshuvah comes from the word Shabbat. Right? What do we do on Shabbat? We return back to the state that we're supposed to be in. Shabbat is a state of tranquility. It's a state of spirituality. We let go of the physicality. We join together with God. So the idea of Shabbat is to allow us to do that, right? The idea of tshuva is to allow us to turn ourselves back into the state that we're supposed to be in order to build up that relationship with God. The whole of the month of Elul has been dedicated to being able to do that. Right? So how does that translate itself practically? What do we have in the month of Elul that we don't have in the other months of the year? So for example, the first thing in shul this morning was that we blew the shofar. Right? Yeah. Blowing the shofar is an indication we're getting close. The shofar is that wake-up call, right? To get us ready for Rosh Hashanah. That's the focal part of the service on Rosh Hashanah is blowing the shofar. And therefore, we blow the shofar just very quickly every morning, except for Shabbat, every morning in the month of Elul, in order to remind us that we're in that state of getting close to Rosh Hashanah. We've got to work on ourselves to become who we need to become. What else do we have? We add in a tefillah called LeDavid Hashem. Now, in the Ashkenazi custom is to recite LeDavid Hashem at the end of Shacharit and at the end of Aravit, at the end of the Ma'ariv service, the evening service. The custom of Nusach Sfar of the Hasidim and of the Sephardim is to recite it in the morning and to recite it after Mincha. Okay. Right? So wherever you find yourself, whatever happens, it's fine. Say it. Whenever they say it, you should say it as well. The idea is to say it twice a day. And we say, LeDavid Hashem Oirid, it's Psalm 27, it's taken out of the book of Psalms, and we say, LeDavid Hashem Oirid v'yishi mimi iro Hashem ma'oiz chayim mimi efchod, And it talks about, the Gemara says, the rabbis say that it's talking about Rosh Hashanah, it's talking about Yom Kippur, right? Making oblique references to get us ready for the upcoming Yom Tovs, right? And then it talks a little bit later on, it mentions Sukkot, Ki Yitzpeneni B'Sukkoi, but interestingly enough, there's no direct reference over here to Elul. And Elul is the month that we recite, the whole of Elul we recite the David Hashem, and we recite it for most of Tishrei as well, but not all of Tishrei, and it doesn't appear. However, if you take a look down at the bottom, the last verse, the penultimate verse, the second from last verse, it says, Lule he'emanti lirot b'tuv Hashem be'eretz achayim, right? That we should be able to look and to see Hashem. The Lule, the word Lule is spelled Lamed Vav Lamed Aleph, which is Elul backwards, right? Which means that there is a reference to Elul inside of the David Hashem, but it appears backwards as Lule. Why would that be? So I thought like this, when we go through a process that this year, we live in a years, right? So this is the last month of the year, and then Tishrei will be the beginning of the next year, right? We're going from Tashin Ayin Hey, we're going to go to Tashin Ayin Vav, 5775 into 5776. The idea of Elul really, the essence of Elul really, is to give us a moment to reflect back on what we've achieved over the year and to be able to take stock, right? A little bit of introspection, right? Take a look and see, what was I doing this time last year? What was I doing during the month of Tishrei last year, during the month of Cheshvan last year, all the way through the year? I get to the month of Elul, and in Elul I'm able to look back and take stock. And I think the idea over here of Lule and Elul, Lule being Elul backwards, is this idea of recognizing that when we get to the month of Elul, we've got to look back, right? Take a look, take stock, and realize what it is that we've done in order to be able to understand what we've achieved throughout this year.
What's the translation of Lule?
The word Lule means, had I not, right? Lule emanti b'tuv Hashem, if I hadn't have believed in Hashem, right? So here, it's the same kind of an idea. There's another idea about Elul, which I think is beautiful. In Tehillim, in Psalms, Psalm number 100 is Mizmor LaTorah. Now we spoke about Mizmor LaTorah in the past. It's recited every morning during Psukei Zimra, and it's very short, but it's very important, and it's about giving thanks to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, giving thanks to God. It's supposed to stand up because it was when the Korban Todah was brought to the temple, right, the Thanksgiving offering. So we try to emulate what took place over there. So it says like this. It's interesting. Inside of Tanakh, there are many occasions when we have something called a Ktiv and a Kri. Ktiv means the way that it's written, and Kri is the way that it's recited, the way that you read it. Right? And sometimes you'll have a word which is written one way, but we read it a different way. In Mizmor LaTorah, we've got a Ktiv and a Kri, right? It's written one way, but it's recited, a different word is recited, but interestingly enough, the word itself, you don't hear any difference, because it's written Lamed Aleph, and we recite it Lamed Vav, which both of them sound like Lo. Right? So we say like this, Da'u, you should know, Ki Hashem hu Elokim, God is God, God is our God, Hu Asanu, He made us, V'lo Anachnu, and not us, we didn't make ourselves. Right? We shouldn't make the mistake of having made ourselves. Right? That's the way that it's written. However, the way that we read it is, Da'u, Ki Hashem hu Elokim, you need to know that God is God, Hu Asanu, He made us, V'loi Anachnu, and we belong to Him. We are His. Right? So the difference between the two, even though you can't hear the difference inside of the way that the word is pronounced, but the difference between the two is very, very significant. It's written, we didn't make ourselves, we shouldn't imagine that we're self-made, and we read it as we belong to Hashem. If you take the two laws, the Lamed Aleph and the Lamed Vav, and you swap around the letters, you'll see that it spells out Elul. Right? The whole function of the month of Elul is that first we should know that we didn't make ourselves, that we shouldn't make the mistake of thinking that we're self-made and that we don't need God. Right? So how does it work? Hu asanu, HaKadosh Baruch Hu made us, we made a declaration. V'lo anachnu, not us. And if we understand that it wasn't us, then it becomes v'lo anachnu, we belong to Him. The whole concept of Elul is what? To bring us up to the point where we're ready to crown God as our God. That's what Rosh Hashanah is all about. The coronation of God. Which means that the avodah, the work inside of Elul, the work that we have to do, what we have to try to aspire towards, is recognizing that however much we have done and however much we've achieved, and that's the idea of Lule, that Elul backwards, looking back at the year and seeing what it is that you've done, nevertheless, you need to know that what you've done with the help of Hashem. Right? You didn't do it by yourself. And the more you understand and recognize that you didn't do it by yourself, the greater is your ability to be connected to God. It's when we imagine that it's me that's doing it, then it becomes a problem. Right? The avodah of Elul. There are many beautiful ideas about this idea of Elul. Elul is some kind of a rectification for the whole year. Which means right now we're in Aleph Elul. This is the first day of Elul. And on this first day of Elul, we can now do tshuva for every first day of the month and the previous months that have taken place. Whatever I didn't do right in the previous months on the first day, I can rectify that during the month of Elul, the first of Elul. The second of Elul is going to help me rectify all the mistakes that I made on the second day of each month, right, in the previous months that we've had up until now. And explain the rabbis that the last week of Elul, which is the last week before we get to Rosh Hashanah, so over there, everything becomes more intensified, it's more concentrated, which means that the last week of Elul is going to allow me on the last Sunday of the year to do tshuva for all of the Sundays of the year that I didn't do what I was supposed to do. And the last Monday of the year, it's going to allow me to do tshuva for all of the Mondays that I didn't do what I was supposed to do until we get through that week of Elul, right? Which means that Elul itself is an incredibly significant month. It's a month of tremendous, tremendous importance, and we need to relate to it in the way that we need to relate to it properly. How do you relate to Elul? So, by the Sfardim, they have a custom to recite what are called slichot for the whole month of Elul. Right? What are slichot? Penitential prayers that you recite. If you want to do it absolutely the correct way, then you've got to get up at midnight and you've got to go and recite them, and they're very long, right? Other people have the custom to do it early in the morning, right? And then to continue with, to begin shacharit at the end of slichot, to continue with shacharit. That's a lot to say, a lot to do, right? And the more the more involved you are in it, the greater your Elul, the greater impact it's going to have on you, right? The problem is by the Ashkenazim, our custom is to recite slichot only a minimum of 4 days prior to Rosh Hashanah. Right? Now this year, slichot have to begin on Motzoi Shabbat, right? On Saturday night. So this year, because Rosh Hashanah begins on Sunday night, we're going to recite slichot from the Motzei Shabbat before Rosh Hashanah, which we're going to have an enormous 8 days worth of slichot as opposed to 30 days worth of slichot that they have by the Ashkenazim. So I'll tell you a little story and then I'll explain why the Ashkenazi custom is the way that it is. It's one of these stories can only happen in Israel. They can't happen anywhere else. I came out of the yeshiva and it was maybe a week before Rosh Hashanah, and I flagged down a cab, and the taxi driver, to me, he looks like a completely irreligious fellow. He's wearing shorts, it's the summer, it's hot outside, right? He's wearing shorts and a t-shirt, he's got nothing on his head. I get into the car, and we start driving. I was going to take me home. We start driving, and he says to me, Tagidli, he says, Atay itchalta litkonen leRosh Hashanah. Did you start getting ready for Rosh Hashanah? What's this fella trying to do with me over here? So I gave like a throwaway line. I said, you know, Ech mitkonanim Rosh Hashanah. How can you get ready for Rosh Hashanah? So he looks at me in the mirror. He looks and he says, I don't understand. He says, what do you mean, how do you get ready for Rosh Hashanah? Slichot. He says to me, have you started saying slichot yet? And because it was the Ashkenazi tradition, right, we hadn't started saying slichot yet. So I said, well, no, not yet. This guy's he's a Sephardi guy. He says to me, I don't understand. He says, for weeks, he says, I've been getting up at 3:30 in the morning, and I'm going to shul, I'm going to synagogue, and I'm reciting slichot, and then we daven kavatikin, right, with the sun up, we daven shacharit, he says, and then I come home and I have something to eat, and then I go to work. He says, how do you get ready for Rosh Hashanah? You're not saying slichot, how do you do that?
You were like,
so at this point, I was squirming. There's no doubt about it, right? I'm like squirming in my chair, thinking, you know what, wait, we should just get to where we need to get to. I got to get out of here. This is embarrassing. It's embarrassing. So I explained to him that the Ashkenazi minhag, right, why do we only recite slichot for a minimum of 4 days? Because the korban, the sacrifices that were brought to the temple, they were left for 4 days in order to inspect them. The Kohanim would inspect the korbanot to make sure there was no blemish on them, and then they would be offered up. If they were clear, they would be offered up. So according to the Ashkenazi custom, 4 days before it was offered up, yeah. Which means that you could bring the korban whenever you want, but it's got to be a minimum of 4 days before it's going to be offered up, in order to be checked.
Forget about Rosh Hashanah in general.
In general, right? Just to check, to make sure that it's got no blemishes. It was forbidden to offer up a korban, a sacrifice that had some kind of a blemish, right? So I explained to him that, you know, on Rosh Hashanah, we look at ourselves as being the korban. We are the sacrifice. We're offering ourselves to Hashem. So 4 days before Rosh Hashanah, we go through the process of reciting slichot and introspection and trying to, you know, get ourselves ready to be pure and unblemished. So I thought I did a pretty good job, right? So this fellow, there's a few moments of silence, and then he looks at me, and then he shrugs his shoulders like this, and he goes, says, I don't know, if you don't recite slichot, how on earth can you be ready for Rosh Hashanah? Good question. A question that has no answer to it. So I learned a few things over there. The first thing is, don't judge by how somebody looks. Don't judge them. I'm sure he went home and he probably told his wife, you're not going to believe this. You know, I gave this real Orthodox looking fellow a ride today in the car, and he doesn't even say slichot. Can you imagine? What kind of people are these? Right? So first of all, the first lesson.
Change it to only 4 days.
It's a machlokes inside of the halacha, right? It depends whether you go according to the Mechaber, the Shulchan Aruch, or whether you go according to the Ramah of Moshe Isserles. Different customs that arose in different communities. I don't know what the catalyst was to make things different between different places. I don't know. You know what? Ask Rabbi Wine. See what he says. That's a historical issue.
Yeah, my wife, I like Hassanish. So the thing is that the great synagogue, Adler, start at 10:30. Obviously, I'm not going to go to, she's very much to Hassanish.
When on
first night.
First night. Yeah. Okay.
What's it? Why is that?
There's an Indian. It's interesting that slichot for the Ashkenazim on Motzei Shabbat, any night that you recite slichot, you can recite slichot every night, but they have to be recited from chatzot, from midnight onwards. Right?
That's a halacha.
Yeah. So 10:30 at night is too early. Right? Chatzot, I would imagine, is probably chatzot hayom and chatzot halayla is exactly the same time. So I would imagine it's probably around 12:30. Yeah, maybe 12:30, 12:35, maybe something like that, right? What's the pshat? By the Ashkenazim, there is a custom that most people recite slichot, the first night of slichot, at night. Right? Why is that? Because one of the slichot that are recited it begins with the words of Motzei Shabbat Menucha. Right? So people have the custom to start reciting them on Saturday night, although there are communities that recite them in the morning instead. Certainly there are communities where they recite slichas only in the morning and they never recite them at night. Well, whatever. I mean, again, whatever your community does, that's what you need to do. It's fine, right? That's what needs to be done. But so what did I learn? I learned a few lessons from this taxi driver. The first one was don't be taken in by the way people look, right? Yeah, for sure. Don't judge a book by its cover. Hopefully he's doing the same thing and not judging me as well. And the other thing is that it's true that even though as Ashkenazim we don't say Slichot until a week before Rosh Hashanah, but that does not detract from the fact that the whole month of Elul is dedicated to the concept of tshuva. That's what it's for. That's really what the month of Elul is for. So that we can finally arrive at Rosh Hashanah in a state where we are ready and able to accept upon ourselves the majesty of God. That's not something that can be done with no preparation whatsoever. So a lot of preparation is being done over here in order to be able to utilize and use Elul properly. Right?
I think once you say Ledura Shemori, get you to the mood of Elul. That's
supposed to.
You didn't have it.
It's supposed to, that's for sure. They say, that the Gemara says that even the fish shake on Elul. When it gets to Elul, the month of Elul, the fish are shaking. Because, Rosh Hashanah is not just a time where we are judged, but the whole world is judged. Right? So, it's something to be concerned about, for sure. Yeah? So I heard my son-in-law told me a story that one of the great Rosh Hashivas from the Mir, Rav Ezrachi, came to a Sheva Brachos. It was in Elul, and on the table in front of him in the Sheva Brachos was a great big salmon that hadn't been started yet. It was just like a whole salmon that was sitting over there. So he said, I mean, I'm not sure that this is exactly the thing you need to say to Sheva Brachos, but whatever. He says, Chazal say, the sages say, that in Elul, even the fish tremble. He says, and he points at that fish that was on the table. He says, how come this fish over here is not trembling? Because it's dead. And how come we're not trembling? He left that question unanswered. So I guess in spiritual terms, right? We have to revive ourselves. That's what we have to do, and that's what Elul is there for. Right? You hear the blowing of the shofar in the shul in the morning, and it's really supposed to waken you up. What else do you have in Elul, the month of Elul? So some people have the custom. There are some communities that have the custom that people don't get married in the month of Elul because it's considered to be a very serious month, a month of tshuva, and not perhaps a month that lends itself to getting married in. However, many people do get married in Elul. So it just depends on your community, not more than that. So in the yeshivas, many yeshivas don't have weddings during Elul. Some do. What can I tell you? My niece is getting married tonight. Right, so I guess some people make weddings during Elul, that's for sure. I mean, yeah, they're getting, the chuppah will be before Shkia, so it'll still be Rosh Chodesh. So I guess that counts a little bit. There's a famous story they tell about the Finkels, who are the Rosh Hashivas of the Mir. I can't remember which one it was, but one of the Rosh Hashiva's sons was getting married, and they went down to Bnei Brak to invite Rav Chatzkel Levinstein, was a mashkiach in Ponovich, but he had a very great connection to the Mir Yeshiva, and they went down to invite him to the wedding, and he was getting married on the first day of Rosh Chodesh Elul. The first day of Rosh Chodesh Elul is really the last day of Av, right? Yesterday. It's a story that goes back, it's going back, 20, 30 years, whatever. And he says, I'm not coming. He says, I don't go to weddings in Elul. He said, it's pasnish, you can't do it. So they try to explain to him that the last day, it's Rosh Chodesh Elul, it's the last day of Av. It's not it's not really Elul at all, right? And he wasn't buying it. He said, no, he says it's Rosh Chodesh Elul, and I don't go to weddings in Elul. So some people...
You can't have any kind of simcha like a Tanoim or Bar Mitzvah.
No, it's interesting. So any other simcha, which is, for example, a Bar Mitzvah, you can't control a Bar Mitzvah. Bar Mitzvah in Elul, for sure you can have a Bar Mitzvah. A bris, a pidyon, all of these kinds of things you can make during Elul. The only thing is things Tanoim as well. Interestingly enough, it says you can. It says more than that. When a couple get engaged, the halacha says that it's okay to get engaged even on the 9th of Av, even on Tisha B'Av, right? Because who knows what might happen, right? So the couple can get together, and everyone can get together, and they can say Mazel Tov, and they can make a Tanoim, they can make an agreement that they're going to get engaged, they're going to get married, even on Tisha B'Av, even on the 9th of Av, right? So for sure in Elul you can. But the only thing that some people are careful about is not to get married during the month of Elul.
You don't behave in Elul like you behave before Tisha B'Av. 3 weeks to that.
No, not at all. No, not at all. Elul is a time where we don't have any restrictions, right? So there's no problems with clothing or shaving or having a haircut or all of these kinds of things. There are no restrictions whatsoever, right? It's not a time of mourning. Right, the build up to Tisha B'Av, the build up to the 9th of Av, we're doing all of those things we're doing because we're in a state of mourning, right? Over here, Elul is not in a state. It's not a state of mourning at all. Quite the opposite. If anything, Elul is the most wonderful period where we're beginning to reconnect together with God, and we're beginning to, feel that sense of closeness that we have with God. And quite the opposite. It's a time that we should be, we should be full of a sense of joy that we've got this opportunity to be able to have that connection with God. It's very interesting. You should know it's very interesting. The idea of people, a couple that are supposed to get married. The Shulchan Aruch has got a chapter dedicated to what happens when a parent dies, and the couple are supposed to get married. What happens with regards to the chuppah? What happens with regards to the sheva brachos? When they're supposed to sit shiva, they're not supposed to sit shiva. It's clear from the halacha that once you've made the date, right, that you shouldn't push off the date unless there's some completely overwhelming reason. The date shouldn't be pushed off at all, right? And if you've got a parent who passes away, Rahman al-Itzlan, it should never happen, but you've got a parent who passes away right before a child's wedding, the wedding should go ahead anyway. It's interesting, you hear sometimes terrible stories of parents who die on the day of the child's wedding, or sometimes even at the wedding itself. Then maybe they just drop down dead. It's for sure it's very difficult. It's a very, 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 very emotionally distraught time. That's for sure. But nevertheless, there are halachas that teaching us what it's. Although yes, and how, that's for sure. I actually went to a wedding where the grandmother had just passed away on the morning of the wedding, and the grandson was getting married, and they didn't tell the grandson, and they got a psak from the rabbi, right? They got a ruling from the rabbi that the father of the boy, who was the son of the person who passed away, should come to the wedding in the regular fashion, and go through the whole of the wedding up until after the chuppah, and then after the chuppah, once the son has come out of the cheder yichud, he should then explain to his son that the grandmother, I think it was the grandmother had passed away. Right, but not to say anything before. Everyone had to be very careful not to say anything, in order that it shouldn't mar the joy of the simcha, of the joy for the chosan and the kala, right? It's interesting. I mean, it's like lots and lots of things that you need to think about. We should never know from these things; they should never happen, right? Yeah. But things that we do have to be aware of.
I learned something that in Israel, I don't know if I want to know if the yeshiva world does that or not. That after sitting shiva, when you get up that day, you go to the cable. I was surprised at that.
Yeah, there are different customs. First of all, you should know that most of what goes on inside of mourning is it's all nearly all customs, right? So there are customs. Some people, the accepted customs, certainly in many communities, is that you don't go to the grave after the burial, and you wait until you have what's called a hakamata matzeva, which is a stone setting. And they, when they put the stone over they put the stone over the grave, and then people come and they make prayers over there, and they say Kaddish over there. However, there is a custom among some communities where you do go to the grave. You get up from Shiva and you go. That's the first thing that you do after you finish sitting Shiva, is that you go to the grave of the person who has passed away. Right now, again, which is right and which is wrong? They're all right. Whatever you do. It's only minhagim. It's only customs.
I told you you're not supposed to go to a cemetery. Once you're there, you can't go back to cemetery for 30 days.
First of all, it says like this: that when a person has passed away, so they're going through a time of judgment, very difficult time for the person, for the soul of the person, the deceased. And there is a it is brought down in various sources that it's better for the whole of the first year to limit going to the grave. However, like I said, there are certain moments when it's considered to be an opportune moment. At the end of the Shiva, maybe at the Shloshim. Here in Israel, the custom is to put up the stone as quickly as possible. Where I come from in England, the custom is to put it up towards the end of the year. Right? Some people have the custom to put it up at the end of the 11th month. Some people at the end of the 12th month. Whatever. I mean, that's it. So everyone should do whatever is best for them. Can you go to a cemetery more than 30 days? As far as I'm aware, you can. There is a custom not to go to the same grave on the same day. That is something which is brought down inside of the halach already, that a person goes to visit a grave and then they leave, and for whatever the reason they want to go back again on the same day, they shouldn't do that. But aside from that, as far as I'm aware, there's no problem with going to a cemetery within 30 days of having visited it before. But like I said, everyone should just do whatever is the norm for them, whatever is their communal custom. That's the best thing to do. And like I said, most of the laws, in inverted commas, most of the halachas of Avelis are really customs. Right? If you take a look, if you learn through the things in the Shulchan Aruch, in the Code of Jewish Law, you'll see that most of the things that appear over there we don't do anymore. There were different customs that were the norm in those days. Today we do different things instead. But
famous book of Avelis put up by not everybody in the United States, but our people, by Dr. Lang from YU.
Uh-huh.
So everybody has that. I mean, always.
Yeah. So there are some classic books with the laws, the laws, like the customs and the laws of mourning. One is called Gesher Achaim. The other one is called Pnei Moshe. Gesher Chaim was written by Rav Tukachinsky. The Pnei Moshe, I can't remember who wrote it. But these are like the classic. There's a book that Art Scroll brought out, which is a translation of the Pnei Moshe called Mourning in Halacha. And over there, they're very extensive. These books. They bring all kinds of sources and all kinds of reasons for things, and it's actually quite a fascinating thing to learn through. Okay, we're going to call it a day. Mitzvah Hashem, first day of Elul. So, at least we finished on time. That's a tikkun, a rectification for all the times that we went over time, right, over the year. But now that we've rectified it, we don't have to worry about it anymore, right? Tomorrow we can finish late, right?